Hello, Degrassi readers, and welcome to Bruce Matthews Library. As always, I'm your host, Mix Lucy, and we're here to talk about our fourth Kids of Degrassi Street book. We're discussing Casey Draws the Line. Now, in my last episode, you may have heard me say that we needed to vote in a poll because there were multiple books published on the same day. And that's true. Casey won the vote. So the vote was between Casey Draws the Line, Karen Keeps Her Word, and Martin Meets the Pirates. Karen Keeps Her Word got 0 votes. Martin Meets the Pirates got 2 votes. And Casey Draws the Line got 6 votes. So there is a fourth Degrassi book that was published on the same day, which is January 1st, 1987. That book is Exit Stage Left, which is a Degrassi Junior High book. So I did not put it on the poll. I didn't think I would have to come to this decision, but maybe we should do all of the Kids of Degrassi Street books first, go generation by generation as well as publication order, just to keep things less confusing for all of us. So Casey Draws the Line won, and before I do my next episode, I'll put up another poll where y'all can vote between Karen Keeps Her Word and Martin Meets the Pirates. But I'm guessing Martin Meets the Pirates will win because Karen Keeps Her Word didn't get any votes last time. But maybe y'all will surprise me. Anyway, that's why we're doing Casey Draws the Line fourth. And before I get into trigger warnings, I'll give you the background information on this book. Publication date. The dedication says, "To Amy, Jo, and Michelle, who brought the first Degrassi kids to life." So, I researched Amy, Jo, and Michelle. Amy Jo is Amy Jo Cooper. She was a writer for the Kids of Degrassi Street, as well as working in the art department. Amy Jo did 6 episodes. The first one, Ida Makes a Movie. The second one, Cookie Goes to Hospital. The third one, Irene Moves In. The fourth one, Noel Buys a Suit. And then she skipped to episode 7, Casey Draws the Line, and episode 8, Pete Takes a Chance. She was a writer for all of those, according to IMDb. And then Michelle is Michelle Dionne. I might be saying that so wrong. It's Dionne. She's known for the additional crew, costume, and wardrobe, as well as art department. But she does have a writer's credit in the end credits of Billy Breaks the Chain, which was not credited for on IMDb. That really shocked me. She did 9 episodes. Episode 4, which is Noel Buys a Suit. Episode 5, which is Lisa Makes the Headlines. Episode 6, which is Sophie Minds the Store. Episode 7, Casey Draws the Line. Episode 9, Chuck Makes a Choice. And 10, which is Billy Breaks the Chain, where she was a writer and costume. Episode 12, which is Benjamin Walks the Dog. Episode 16, which is Connie Goes to Court. And then episode 19, Rachel Runs for Office. So Michelle and Amy Jo are who this book is dedicated to. And the Goodreads rating is 4 stars with a total of 6 ratings and 0 reviews. There are 2 other current readers and 2 5 stars, 2 4 stars, and 2 3 stars, which is the highest rated Degrassi book we've read so far. That's pretty good. The Lormer description says, "What do you do when your pet rabbit hops away? When you ignore a chain letter and get bad luck? When you're left to take care of a huge overactive sheepdog?" Casey Draws the Line and Other Stories shows kids who are faced with challenging and amusing dilemmas, who respond with spirit and ingenuity. These stories offer delightful evidence of kids' creativity and resourcefulness based on the groundbreaking Kids of Degrassi Street. television program. This book offers a sensitive and engaging look at the challenges of childhood. The subjects say juvenile fiction/humorous stories. I highly disagree. I don't see these as humorous stories. Like, yeah, you might laugh a little bit, but here's where the trigger warning comes in. A pet rabbit dies. Children smoke cigars. Like, the dog almost dies. And they're playing with fucking Ouija boards. Like, they're trying to contact the dead. This is not humorous, really. Like, if you think about it, that's not really humorous. That's, like, kind of scary shit for, like, children. Like, ages 8 through 11, this rabbit fucking dies. That's not a humorous story to me. So, like, I feel like describing it as humorous stories will set, like, the tone, because our pictures come back in this book. Our last two books only had 3 pictures each. When Lisa Makes the Headlines had a picture for like almost every 5 pages. This book had a picture pretty much every 5 pages as well. I had this theory in my brain the whole time. Is it just because they're both female-led stories in the first, like in the namesake? Or is it because they're trying to lighten the tone, which is like why it says humorous stories? And then I'm like, well, maybe it's just what they could fit in with the amount of pages that they were told ahead of time. Like, I don't know everything about books. But like humorous stories, I don't feel like this really is that. Maybe I'll put a poll in the bottom of the episode on Spotify and y'all can vote and tell me if you think this is just humorous stories. Because it doesn't feel like it to me. But anyway, page count 140 and interest ages 8 through 11. You can still buy this for paperback $16.95 Canadian, and hardcover is the same price. But if you want to, you can read along in the Internet Archive copy that will be linked in the description down below. I will warn you, it's missing a lot of pages, but if you message me on Instagram, I will send you the missing pages, like pictures of them, because the wonderful Degrassi kid did that for me, and I kept them, and yeah, you just have to message me, which is Lucy0520 on Instagram. So we have the same designer, illustrator, and editor from the last book. Designer Dawn Fernley, illustrator Heather Collins, and editor Kathy Vanderlyn. So if you want to hear about them, for Dawn Fernley, you can go back to Lisa Makes the Headlines, and for our illustrator and editor, you can go back to the one where I discussed Griff Gets a Hand, which is titled The One I've Been Putting Off. So this book contains the episodes Casey Draws the Line, which is episode 7, Billy Breaks the Chain, which is episode 10, and Benjamin Walks the Dog, which is episode 12. I did see a common theme in between the 3, which I thought could explain why they were paired together. The common theme of taking on responsibilities for your actions. Because in these episodes, Lisa and Casey take on a responsibility of a pet rabbit. And then in the second one, Billy says only hard work will get him to his dream of hockey camp. But then he slowly gets tested with his belief and grapples with the responsibility that, yeah, it's only his hard work. And then finally, in the last episode, Billy and Pete have to take on a dog walking job while watching Billy's little brother and trying to take up smoking. So they take on a lot of responsibility and pay for some bad actions. And now we'll get started to the actual book notes. Chapter 1 of Casey Draws the Line starts on page 2 with the chapter that says The Rabbit Pact. And my first note is that it's July. So yeah, on page 2 it says, one warm July morning, the girls were looking for something to do, and they thought they'd pay a visit to Rabbit. So yes, it is July. I feel like that's important. I mean, like, you can tell it's July because they're out of school, but in the episode itself, they're actually in Miss Gonzalez's classroom writing a paper set in the past testing their writing skills in their past tense. But in the book, they don't do the whole classroom setup of them looking back and narrating them writing this paper. They literally just put you in that summer when they had the rabbit. And like, this is something I'm also curious about. Like, would y'all rather have them be in the classroom looking back on this experience in the book? Or do you like it better that they took this different approach? I think I kind of like this approach. We get a lot more of like the behind the scenes of this summer than we do in the episode. Like, it's not really taking out much, but it did feel very different because I kind of watch while I read, and it was hard to follow when you do it that way. So I'm just intrigued to hear what y'all think about that. And then it also says that they found Noel hanging up the sign that says free to a good home, one rabbit, very nice. In the episode, they don't find Noel hanging up the sign. It's already up, and the sign actually says, for free, give to a very good home, very nice rabbit. Like, it says things a little bit differently. So I thought that was interesting. They do that a lot to like change things up. Also in the episode, we hear that Lisa like left her lunch at home and she did it again. So she does this a lot, and Casey is splitting her lunch with her. I just feel like it's very kind of important to note that Casey is the responsible one. And we see this a lot in their friendship. And I think that's why I love Casey so much. Like, she's my favorite kid of Degrassi Street. So I'll also state that in the picture in this book, Casey and Lisa are wearing like different clothes. So they changed Casey's sweater from a Snoopy sweater that says baseball to just a plain sweater that says baseball. They took out Snoopy. And I'm wondering if it's like for copyright purposes, because in the show that didn't matter, but maybe in the book, like maybe it was something with the publisher or the illustrator, maybe copyright. Very interesting. And then page 4 is where my notes pick up again. It says, though she'd sometimes help to feed him. Yeah, it says, Noel wasn't convinced. Lisa had never given Rabbit much attention. He was Noel's pet after all. But as soon as it seemed Rabbit might be leaving, she was alarmed. Yeah, it's very interesting because this is Casey's idea. Casey does seem to be the one who wants to take on more responsibilities than Lisa, and she wants a pet more. She's never had a pet. They both live right next door to each other, so they seem like they would be in the same financial situation, but like maybe not, which is also kind of strange because Casey is an only child and Lisa has a brother. So it's just intriguing to keep track of their differences. And then page 5 says that Noel reminded them about how much work there is to taking care of a pet. Not only regular feeding, but cleaning the hutch, which is that little outdoor fenced-in area, and making sure there was always plenty of fresh water. While it's important info, and I can see why they put it in the book, in the episode, Noel actually gets cut off by the excited Casey after he says, but you don't know how much work this is. You gotta feed him. She cuts him right off. They also put that the girls jumped up and down with excitement. In the episode, they don't actually do that, but like I can see why they added it in. It's just like to add extra emotions because there's no visual aspect other than this one drawing, which is, again, inaccurate. So on page 7, we see like a half-page picture of Lisa and Casey petting Rabbit and doing their pact when they're like, water you when you're thirsty and love you forever and always, so help us. And I just thought it was a really great picture. And I want to note that the pictures are coming back because in our last 2 books, we only got 1 picture per episode novelization, and they were like before the beginning of each episode novelization, and they were just random pictures from a moment in that episode. But in this book, we've got pictures like almost every 5 pages or so. And then page 8 names this little girl that I thought was Cookie. I have seen this episode like 3 or 4 times before recording this, and this little girl that's hanging out with them the whole time, I thought she was Cookie. I kept looking at her and I'm like, that is Cookie. Why is Cookie hanging out with Lisa and Casey? Like, it didn't fully make sense to me, but like, she is so much younger than Ida and Noel. But like, maybe she got tired of hanging out with Noel and Lisa is Noel's little sister, so like, maybe. But no, this is someone named Dodie, I think is how you would pronounce that. Dodie. I'm going to call her Dodie. Because, like, otherwise, what is that? Anyway, that's her name. And page 8 is where they name her for the first time. I didn't hear them say her name at all in the episode. So that's why I was like, she's Cookie. She looks just like her to me. Anyway, page 10 has another great drawing. See? Pages apart, like 2 pages apart, and there's another picture. And it's of the hand puppets that they were playing with in the episode at their sleepover. And then page 13, we pan back to the classroom in the episode where the girls were writing their papers about this. But here we just continue as if this is all currently happening. And so there is something that says they're playing Risk. When I was watching this episode, I did not know what board game it was, and it was bothering the heck out of me. I really thought they had made this up. So page 16 says they're playing Risk. I've never played that before, so I'm going to sound kind of dumb that I didn't know what that was. In case you also didn't know what it was, there you go. And then page 15 has another picture, and page 16, the line is off by a meter. The episode says that 2 feet at the minute and 37-second mark. But 1 meter is 3.28 feet, according to Google. So that's an extra foot more. So their line is off. So that's the line that marks Casey's property and Lisa's property. So Lisa's dad called the guy who put in the stakes, according to the book. And Lisa thought it was dumb. But according to the episode, it was actually Casey's dad. They say that at the 8 minute and 56-second mark. So I don't know why they changed that, but we go back to the theory that I've been saying to the very beginning. Kit Hood's mom wrote the books, and she has nothing else to do with Degrassi other than writing these books. And the fact that her son is a producer, she doesn't really fully know everything. And she gets a lot wrong. And I don't think anyone fact-checked her. Anyway, page 17 says that Norman likes fights. So Norman is this little boy that's been hanging out with him. But they name him in the episode, so I wasn't as confused as I was with Dodie, as I'm going to call her. The exact line for page 17 that states that Norman likes fights says, if they put up a fence, they'll have to tear down the shed and the rabbit hutch, predicted Norman, who loved a good quarrel. The line goes right through it. He was wearing boots to go with the military pictures on his black t-shirt, and he stamped around the stakes as if he were marching on a parade ground. And like, we see him doing a lot of things, like insisting that Casey's dad would be the one to put up a fence. And that really starts the fight because Casey didn't like his critical tone. And it gives a lot of like the background noises on page 17 as well, where it says they thought it over in silence. A helicopter whirred high overhead. A dog barked. Somewhere someone was hammering on wood. So you can hear all these sounds kind of making them more nervous and making them feel like they have to make a decision like right that second. And then page 18 says, Norman looked from one to the other, enjoying the signs of an argument. And he's the one who says, let's go, Lisa. And they walked away, leaving Casey annoyed and upset, staring at the offending stakes in the ground. So, yeah, Norman is one of those guys I would not hang out with. Like, it even says, she always gets her way, Norman went on, fanning the flames. So, this episode kind of really points out that I think there's like a Bible verse that says, you are who you hang out with, basically. like not in those exact words, but that's basically what it means. It's like Proverbs or something. Don't quote me on a whole lot of Bible stuff, please. Okay, editing me here. It's actually Proverbs 13:20. Whoever keeps company with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm. And there's more. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. And Proverbs 22:24-25 says, don't hang out with angry people, don't keep company with hotheads. This is just from basic Googling Proverbs verse about keeping good company. Anyway, this would be a valuable lesson for Lisa. That's just a verse I remembered hearing a lot when I was younger. Anyway, back to the podcast. But yeah, page 20 says that Casey nailed string to the shed, but in the episode, she's actually just wrapping a rope around the stakes that are already in the ground. That's page 20. The exact quote is, that was the last straw. Casey flung the puppet to the floor and ran out. She'd show Lisa Kennard, she thought. She went home, found some string, took it out of the shed. She nailed one to the end to the nail in the shed and pulled it through the rabbit hutch and across the nearest stake. So it says she nailed it, but she actually just tied it. And it was a very loose tie, to be honest. Like, I feel like just moving it a few inches would have made it fall down. And then on page 21, there's another picture. It's like a half a picture. Like, it takes up half the page. And it's of them fighting in Lisa's bedroom. And then I don't have another note until page 27, which is where there's another picture after the fight between Casey and Lisa, when Lisa steals the rabbit, named Rabbit, and her and Norman kind of skip off merrily to her front porch. That's what the picture is of. And you can see the board in the picture that Casey had put up to divide the hutch in half. And then my next note is for page 29. There's another picture that's a half one of Lisa sitting on her front porch with Rabbit, looking concerned. You're going to be able to hear my mom playing and singing music in the background because I'm recording this at 5 in the morning. I hope you enjoy. And then on page 31, there's another picture. It's another half one. So it says, Dodie sighed helplessly and went home. Closed off from his favorite place in the sunshine, Rabbit shivered and twitched his nostrils. He didn't like having his life upset. And that's after Casey put in like a lid to go over her side of the hutch. And when Lisa put Rabbit down on the ground in Casey's side of the hutch after their little fight, Casey put the lid down, and that is when his sunshine was taken away, and he like shivered and twitched his nostrils. This book does like a lot of describing of what Rabbit does when he's like nervous or upset, and I really like it. You might notice it a little bit in the episode, but it's kind of hard to see like the emotions of a rabbit because they can't tell a rabbit to act upset as an actor, you know? He's just going to do what he do. So, but they can like really tell you in the book. And then my next note is for the very next page, page 32, and it says exactly what I just explained. I love how much Rabbit's emotions are shown with his nervous nose twitches and fear of the dark. And that's because we get to the next part where Casey puts him in that crate in the shed and padlocks the door, which I'm just going to state that, like, don't do that. I feel like this is obvious, but, like, don't do that. Because, like, oxygen, once you breathe it in and out, like, it's not the same. And you, like, should not be breathing the same air like that all over. You need to have airflow coming in and out. Kind of a deal. But yeah, it says, alone in the dark, Rabbit didn't know he was being protected. He just knew he was frightened. And then there's a part that says Casey brought out a chair to paint as an excuse to be out on her back porch. She wasn't going to miss the sight of Lisa's face when she discovered Rabbit was gone. She didn't have to wait long. Lisa had been looking for an excuse too. She wanted to know how Casey would react to the damaged hutch. But okay, in the episode, we don't see her bring out a chair or paint. So I was not sure like where that line was coming from. I think they just added it in. And then on page 33, there is a note that says Rabbit is puzzled and blinking. And like it shows him kind of reacting to being out in the sun after being locked up in the shed. And it says, Lisa told herself that poor Rabbit, locked in the shed, alone and scared, would have to be rescued. Casey was thinking of Rabbit too, but she didn't intend to keep him locked up forever. But he had to be protected from the enemy. The enemy is now Lisa, as if she wanted to do anything but share. Okay. She felt so sorry for him, though. Alone in the dark. Maybe she could bring him out for a minute and comfort him with a big meal of lettuce. She checked that the coast was clear, then undid the padlock and brought the cage out into the late afternoon sunshine. She bent to feed the puzzled, blinking prisoner. So, yes, puzzled and blinking and a prisoner, because he's in a crate, like a dog crate, which I hate putting my dog in a crate, so I cannot explain this. I'm going to pause for the morning and then come back to this in the afternoon. Page 35 has a great picture of Lisa spraying Casey with the hose while Casey is trying to feed lettuce to Rabbit. And the door to Rabbit's crate in this picture is open. And then page 37 has another great picture. It is a half picture of Rabbit in the grass after he has ran away. He's hiding in the woods from a bunch of barking dogs. And you can read the narration that says, "It was all very different here. No shouting, no floods of water, but the sound of barking that had always made him quiver with fear now seemed very near. In the backyard, the battle raged on." So again, I really like the narration of what Rabbit's going through. And then on page 38, it says Rabbit heard them calling, but was too scared to come out. So this is where I kind of have a trigger warning just for like animal fear and the fact that Rabbit's going to pass soon due to a dog attack. Thankfully, there's no explicit detail of that, but you do get the little bit on page 38 that says, Rabbit heard, but dared not move. He was much too frightened by a snuffling and panting coming closer and closer. Frozen with panic, he watched as the long grass was parted by a pointed muzzle, and he blinked straight into the hungry eyes of a large dog. And then on the next page, it flashes straight to next morning, Lisa sat by the broken hutch, her arms hugging her knees. So thankfully, no huge description of what happened, but I mean, clearly something happened and Rabbit knew it was going to happen, and that alone can be quite triggering. So that's why I point back to the description on Lorimer Publishing website. The description said the subject was humorous stories. That is not humorous to me, nor do I think it would be humorous to a child, whom is the actual target audience for this book. But I'm going to move on to page 40 because I don't want to read any more sad stuff. Page 40 has another great picture. It's a half picture of Lisa and Casey pouring out the seeds because they were planting some kind of flowers. I don't really know what kind, they weren't stated, but some kind of flowers were being planted on a grave for Rabbit, which is sweet. And then that is the last page of the Casey Draws the Line episode. The next episode we're going to go into is episode 10. This is called Billy Breaks the Chain, and it starts on page number 44, and that's actually where my first note is. It's a really small note, but page 44 says that the kite is yellow, blue, and orange. But when you turn on the episode, it's actually orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. It's like stripes, like a rainbow flag. Sorry, I know that's gay, but like, that's the only description I can think of in my head. Okay, editing me, I don't know why I apologized for being gay. I am gay. Please do be gay. Being gay is awesome. I love you. That kind of describes it very accurately. And then it also states that this is a couple of days after Pete's birthday. It does not say a month, but it does say Pete was not doing badly for someone who'd only had his birthday present a couple of days. So that's why so like, even if he got this at a birthday party, like 2 or 3 days after his birthday, that would mean it's like 4 days at the most after his birthday. I don't actually know when Pete Riley's birthday is. I can Google it real quick. It literally just says John Lanou is an actor best known for his role as Pete Riley and Alex Yanku on the Degrassi series. It's not saying a birth date for the actor or the character. I don't know, but in the book, it's after his birthday. Sorry. I don't know when it is. And then on page 45, there is a picture. It's a whole page picture of them flying the kite. You don't get to see the actual kite, but you get to see them with the string. And you can see Billy running in the background and Casey timing him. And then on page 46, we do get a follow-up to the end of Lisa Makes the Headlines. The end of Lisa Makes the Headlines is when Lisa finds out that they weren't stealing from Ida. They were actually giving Ida the sweatshirt that says Property of Ida. And then her and Casey were let into the INC club. So we get that little follow-up right here on page 46 that says, the fall before, for a brief few weeks, Casey and Lisa had belonged to the very exclusive INC club, a group of older kids who met in an old tin shed behind Ida Lucas's house. After months of hinting and pleading, the girls had, at last, been allowed to join the club, run with an iron hand by Ida Lucas, with some help from Lisa's brother Noel. Then suddenly the whole thing had fallen apart when the older kids lost interest in the club, considering themselves too grown up. Now the old shack had been abandoned so long that its green paint was flaking and cobwebs were veiling the windows. The last time Lisa had taken a peek at it, early dandelions were rank in the long grass beside the broken fence. It was quite a mess. Editing me here, so I kind of did some math, and it seems like it's been around a year, because Ida's birthday is in the fall. That's when they were doing that party. Now they're getting ready to do a creep show in the clubhouse, so it's around Halloween. So roughly a year. Probably that Ida's birthday is somewhere in between after Halloween and before Thanksgiving, because Irene Moves In is episode number 3, and that's Halloween. And then Ida's birthday, episode number 5, Lisa Makes the Headlines. So roughly in between those 2 days. Truthfully, we do know that the first 4 episodes are like actually 4 years apart, and they did one per year. So this timeline doesn't match up at all, but the book gives us this timeline that doesn't actually exist, and we're gonna play along, I guess. Okay, so editing me has to edit me, I guess. I was looking for something else and found it. I was looking in my Lisa Makes the Headlines book to try to figure out when Cookie moved, a bit more about Ida's birthday. And so Lisa Makes the Headlines starts on the first morning of Thanksgiving weekend. It still doesn't give me an exact day for when her exact birthday is. Canadian Thanksgiving in 1986 was October 13th, so before Halloween, which means that the Lisa Makes the Headlines book has to acknowledge that those episodes are years apart, but it doesn't really seem to, but there you go. So that's kind of the follow-up. So yeah, that was the fall before this. It also says that the tin shed is in Ida Lucas's backyard, but when we see them running to the shed after asking Ida if they can take it over, they run in the opposite direction of Ida's house. So that doesn't line up in my brain, but I have no evidence against it other than that, so I guess, maybe. Just feels unlikely to me. And then on the very next page, we have some of Lisa's thoughts that says, but they couldn't just walk in and take it over. Even though the old INC club had broken up, somehow the original clubhouse still belonged to the members. Lisa had hoped Noel would let them have it, but it seemed that even Noel still needed an okay from Ida. So Lisa thought, we'll just have to ask Ida. Let's hope she's in one of her good moods. And then there's also more insight into Billy's training on the very next page, which is page 48, where it says 17 minutes and 23 seconds, announced Casey. Billy wiped his sweating palms on his tracksuit. Not bad, eh? It was the longest run he had done that week. But to Billy, who wanted more than anything else in the world to be goalie on the junior ice hockey team for the summer, any amount of training was worth the effort. Competition for places was tough. His greatest rival was Ralph Squeeze Sigel, the heavyweight goaltender. So I also made the note that said that it had Squeeze's real name. We never hear him called anything but Squeeze in the episode, so I just wanted to state that out here. His name is Ralph Sigel. It doesn't say how he got the nickname Squeeze, but everyone calls him that, even to his face, so he must be fine with it. And it says, Squeeze had a head and shoulders start over everybody else because he was built like a brick wall. Casey handed Billy the stopwatch and he began running on the spot, eager to finish his workout and get changed for hockey practice. So, I've never played hockey, but I have done swimming, and we were never advised to work out before practice. Granted, this was like a high school swim team, and I had like gym and PE on the same exact day right before swim team practice. So like I guess I did technically, but it wasn't advised, and those are like required classes for me. So kind of just was what it was. I just found it interesting that he's working out before practice, and it was the longest run he'd done all week. So he'd been training for a whole week, and he ran for a whole 17 minutes. Like, that's quite a bit. And I don't think he's actually supposed to be running that long. I feel like he's probably trying to run quicker than that, but it doesn't say his length of the run, just that it was the longest run. I kind of want more details, but I guess it's semantics, not important, probably. Page 49 says that Lisa yelled, "You'll need about 10 kilo of luck to beat Squeeze." But in the episodes, she says 20 pounds of luck. So I needed to Google here. 10 kilos is 22 pounds. So very close, only 2 pounds off. I just kind of like, I'm curious here. This is the second time we've had this instance of the book has the Canadian measurements and the episode has the American. I'm wondering if that was a marketing choice, could also be that they didn't have an American distribution for these books just yet, so they didn't think it was a big deal. Could also be that the books were meant to replace the episodes for people who didn't have access to them, so maybe they didn't think it mattered because people wouldn't try to compare. So a little bit farther down in that same exact page, we get some more of Lisa's inner thoughts. I could use some confidence too, thought Lisa. If we have to face Ida, maybe we should take another good look at the clubhouse to see if it's worth it. So she's really kind of measuring up. Is it worth it to confront Ida? Ida is seen as bossy or stuck up or mean to younger kids. And I've stated this before in the episode novelization of Connie Makes the Catch, because I was trying to figure out the age of Liz, Connie's older sister, and I kind of noticed how Ida treats Connie's older sister Liz, and I kind of saw her as treating Liz like she was younger, and like Ida's above her because Liz seems younger. And Lisa seems to feel the same, like Ida doesn't treat people very nicely. So she's measuring up to see, is the clubhouse worth being treated a certain way or worth asking about it or just something like that. And on page 50, the very next page, we have a bit of insight to what the clubhouse looks like. It says, Lisa, Casey, and Pete went over the next day. Inside, the clubhouse was dark and musty. Old club notices, stained with mildew, were peeling from the walls. Noel's Bigfoot mask glowered at them from a dim corner. This is the Bigfoot mask from the episode Irene Moves In, which is the third episode of the series, and it was in the first Kids of Degrassi Street book that I covered, and it was the last episode novelization in that book, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, Noel's Bigfoot mask glowered at them from a dim corner. Cobwebs drooped from the ceiling like ghostly fingers. It was all very creepy. I hope there aren't any tarantulas in here, whispered Casey, shuddering. All it needs is a little fixing up, said Pete. Staring around, he was beginning to get an idea. And like, while all this is happening, when you watch the episode version, you actually see Billy get the chain letter, which is the proverbial chain in which he breaks in the title of the episode. So while all this is happening, in the actual episode, you see a mailman drop off the letter through the little letter slot in the door, and you see Benjamin run to the door and pick up the letter and run up to Billy's room and hand it to him, while Billy is lifting weights and doing more training for this hockey team that he wants to be a part of. And then on page 51, we have a little half picture of Billy holding the chain letter as he runs in to yell at the group of kids and ask them and try to figure out who sent it because he thinks it's a big prank from them. And page 52 kind of better explains the letter, although we don't get to fully read it. The better explanation of the letter comes from Casey. She says, "It's a chain letter," she said in an odd whisper. "What's a chained letter?" asked Lisa. "It's like a curse, only you don't know who put it on you. But if you send copies of the letter to some other people, the bad luck goes from you to them. Listen," she read aloud in a solemn voice. "You are compelled to render, 5 times over, the exact intentions and instructions." Lisa wrinkled her face. "What's that mean?" "It means," said Casey, "he has to make 5 copies of this letter and mail them out, or else he's doomed." The word doomed came out like a tolling of a bell. Lisa broke an uneasy hush. Send bad luck to 5 other people? Or else? "Aw, come on," said Billy, a little nervously. It's just a joke. And then my next note is for page 53. It says Casey was watching him with horrified fascination. Great, said Billy. He wanted to get going, away from all the long faces. Casey was studying him in horrified fascination. So long, guys. I've got another practice. The coach is timing us today. So Casey is horrified. And Casey, she seems like she knows a lot about this kind of stuff, but it doesn't say how she knows. It just, on page 54, it names the hockey rink. It is the Memorial Arena, and I don't remember seeing the name in the episode, so I just wanted to put it out there. It says, by the time he reached the Memorial Arena, he'd recovered his usual good spirits. Everything seemed more normal out in the sunshine. So, Memorial Arena. And page 55 changes things up a bit as well, and it puts things after practice when they're not yet, and skips over the whole practice scene of him breaking his string on his padding, as well as the dialogue on page 55 is from after practice the day after this one for some odd reason. And then it flashes back to him receiving the letter on page 56. So, like I said earlier, he received the letter before we saw the inside of the clubhouse when you're watching the episode. But here it decided to show him reacting and running to go tell his friends about the letter before it shows him thinking about when he got the letter as how we see it in the book. Which is an interesting way to do it, especially when you take into consideration the last episode in this book, where in the TV show, we see them reflecting on the summer while writing a paper in school. But in the book, they just show the summer itself. So it's just interesting to see what they decide to show as past tense and what they don't in this book. At least to me, I find it interesting. So on page 55, it says, the coach had congratulated both of them afterwards. Good practice, Squeeze. Billy, watch your rebounds. We wouldn't want anybody getting any lucky shots. But with a bit of luck yourself, you might be wearing one of the team sweaters soon, eh? Don't count on it, Billy, Squeeze had muttered. But even Squeeze's comment hadn't lowered his hopes. But that darn letter still bothered him a little. It was so weird. This morning, he'd been working out with his dumbbells, flexing his muscles, like the guys on the sports posters he had pinned to the bedroom wall, when his little brother Benjamin came clattering up the stairs. Hey, Billy, there's a letter for you. A letter? Apart from birthday and Christmas cards, he didn't get much mail, and this was a long, white, official-looking envelope with a strange sign on it and no return address. His first thought when he had read the typewritten message was that some of his friends had sent it as a joke, a bad one. Now he wasn't so sure. He sat in the blue-tiled change room, watching Squeeze putting on his equipment. Squeeze was one big mass of superstitions. He was always performing little pregame rituals, such as turning his hockey bag inside out, pointing his boots to the north, and uncrossing all the crossed sticks. He'd be just the sort of person who might try to unnerve a rival. He realized that Squeeze was looking in his direction, so he bent over his leg pads, tugging at a problem strap. He pulled a bit too hard and the strap snapped. "Aw, shoot," Billy muttered. Squeeze grinned. "Tough luck, Billy." He lumbered through the doorway. Billy sighed and searched around for a spare pad. So, in the episode, this is a lot different. In the episode itself, we actually have like 2 different days of practice where these things happen 2 different days apart. So in the first day, he does the tightening of the pad where the I think it's called the strap. I was going to say string. The strap pulled too hard and snapped. But in the second day, there's the conversation between Billy and the coach, where Billy actually approaches the coach himself on his way into the practice and asks about the team sweaters. So, I don't know why they changed this in the book. It's really not that big of a deal, but it makes me curious. I have that theory, and it's seeming to be correct, that Kit Hood's mom wrote the books, and no one really went back and proofread. And it kind of seems like that's because there was like a time crunch or something. They seem to be working on multiple of these books at the same time, since 4 of them were published on the same exact date. And 3 of those 4 were all written by her. So that's a lot to do at once. And you've got 3 episodes per book, so you can see why a lot of these mistakes would happen. And then my next note is for page 57, where it says, page 57 has interesting detail about which door the girls use. So it says, Lisa and Casey walked slowly down Degrassi Street towards Ida Lucas's house. After some discussion, they decided that a formal knock at the front door was making too big a deal of their mission, and a casual approach through the backyard might be the best way to handle things. As they got up to the back window, they could see Ida and her friend Irene at the kitchen table. It was a strange scene. Ida was wearing a flowered scarf tied around her hair and big dangling hoop earrings. She was dealing out cards, but it didn't look like a regular card game. The cards had pictures on them. They could hear her faintly, and that one means a long life, and you're going to have a really good time. Like, you're going to have a happy life. Telling fortunes? Whispered Casey, and that's when Lisa pulls at her arms and tells her to get down. So there's actually kind of a lot of notes in this really small area where, like, it seems they had a purpose for what door that they chose, but I don't feel like kids would actually think that deeply on it. I guess it is kind of interesting that they went to the back door, so maybe it was on purpose, and I just didn't think that hard. But page 58 is where the lot of notes come from. It says that Ida is wearing the scarf and she was dealing out the cards and detailing everything. But in the episode, it's Irene, not Ida. And you can kind of tell by their voice who it is. Even though you can't see their face in the episode, you can tell by the voice who it is. And then page 61 is a whole page picture in itself. And it's the kids at the diner. You can see Billy and Pete sitting at the table playing with what Pete calls his lucky coin. And then page 62 says, there were giggles from Irene and Ida after Lisa and Casey left, but that's not in the episode. I have some notes on page 60, and it says, Lisa and Casey slumped in disappointment as they left the yard. They didn't hear the explosion of smothered giggles in the kitchen. So page 60 kind of makes it seem like Ida and Irene were joking and messing with Lisa and Casey, in my opinion, because they describe a explosion of smothered giggles in the kitchen. We don't get to hear those in the episode, but we also don't get to see Lisa and Casey walk all the way away. Like, we just flash to them at the York Cellar Diner, where page 60 says feeling dejected, they headed for the York Cellar Diner, where Billy and Pete were waiting for the news. The boys were at a table lazily spinning Pete's lucky coin for points. So I guess this is some kind of coin spinning game that they've made up with a point system and everything. Pete had first started showing off the coin a couple of months before, claiming it couldn't fail because it had came all the way from Ireland on one of the first ships to reach Canada. Billy had remarked, as he always did, that the coin seemed very shiny for something so old, and he'd gotten the same old reply about generations of the Riley family keeping it polished. So that's important stuff later on, but that's not explained in the episode. It's only in this book, so I thought I would read it out to you. And then page 61 has a whole picture of this scene where you can see Billy and Pete spinning the coin as Lisa and Casey walk up to this table at the diner. And then on page 62, you can kind of read this description of how Casey and Lisa see the situation that they walked away from at Ida's house, where they're kind of explaining how Ida said no to them, where Billy asks, "Stars? What stars are those?" "How should we know?" Casey replied. "They're the wrong ones, that's all." The waitress came by chewing a big wad of gum and slapped down 2 plates of chips in front of the boys. Helping herself to a chip, Lisa tried to describe Ida's odd behavior. So I'm emphasizing the word chip like this because in America, we would call these French fries. I still think in Canada, you would call these French fries. I don't really know of a lot of places other than I think it's Britain, where you would get fish and chips. And I guess Canada is British territory. See, this is what I was saying earlier when I was pointing out how the book has the Canadian measurements of things and the episode doesn't. Now, in the episode, they don't say the word French fry out loud, but they also don't say the word chip out loud. But you can tell that these are potato wedges, French fries, like you would have for poutine. But it's not poutine because there's not gravy and such on it. They're just plain French fries. But again, nitpicky, but I think when I'm thinking of the word chip or chips, I'm thinking of potato chips. Like a bag of Lay's. And this is Ore-Ida French fries. So anyway, Casey continues. She had all these strange cards, and she was reading Irene's fortune off of them. "Hey, maybe Ida could tell you what to do about the chain letter, Billy." Billy snorted. "Go ask Ida?" Casey had been pondering. "I know what we could do. Ouija." "Ouija," the boys echoed in chorus. "Yeah, my Ouija board game, where the finger moves to yes or no when you ask it questions. We could ask it whether or not Billy is safe from the curse." "You're crazy," said Billy. So in the episode, Casey does say, "I know what we could do, Ouija." But the rest of that response is not in the episode, other than Billy saying, "You're crazy." So yeah, in the episode, everyone sitting at the table kind of already knows what a Ouija board is, or they're just not asking. So in the book, they describe it. And I feel like they probably should, because there's no picture in this book of a Ouija board. So the visual aspect is in a TV show, but it's not in the book. So you would need to describe it. And that's why that's there. And then my next note is for page 63. And my note says, "Shows us a lot of Billy's thoughts." That was a loud sound of my dog jumping off the bed. Give me a second. So this is because it says, "Think about it," Lisa said earnestly. "That chain letter could ruin your chances of playing summer hockey, Billy." Friends like her are all I need, Billy thought. He was getting mad. "I'm not going to let some phony curse stop me," he said, grabbing the salt shaker and giving it a vigorous shake. The top fell off and a shower of salt landed on his chips. Spilled salt? One of the worst signs of bad luck. The girls exchanged significant glances. "It was just an accident, Billy. Don't worry," Pete told him, not very convincingly. Who's worried, he thought. Curses are phony, aren't they? The little incident nagged at him off and on for the rest of the day, even in the middle of hockey practice, when usually he was aware of nothing but the other guys on the ice. So that just kind of shows you that he's kind of resenting this friendship where they are kind of so superstitious and he's just not. And it's making him more nervous, it seems. And my next note isn't until page 67, where it just says that page 67 has a picture, and the picture is a little bit of them doing the Ouija board, but you can't see the board at all. It's a very small picture. It's not even a half a page. Like, truly, it's very small. You can just see that they are sitting on what seems to be wooden crates, and the table seems to be like a large wooden spool, like an industrial spool. Yeah, it's really small and hard to see any of the detail, but you can kind of see, like, Lisa and Casey both have their hands on this piece of plastic on top of a square board on top of the wooden spool. And that's really all you can see. And then my next note is and it says it shows a lot more enthusiasm than the episode, is when they start talking about the haunted house that they want to do. And the real notes kind of start more on page 68, where it says, now for the big question. Casey took a deep breath and asked, is Billy safe from the curse? Now, Lisa, concentrate. The girls held their breath. The boys pretended they weren't at all interested, but they couldn't help watching as the pointer swung slowly towards yes, hesitated, and then moved quickly to no. Wow, there you go. Proof, said Casey. You can't ignore the chain letter now, Lisa warned. You pushed it, Billy accused them. How could it move by itself? Wanting to lighten things up, Pete suggested asking the Ouija if they should have a creep show as a grand opening. So this is kind of where you get back to the timeline and what time of year this is around. It seems to be around Halloween, so that tells us where Pete's birthday is a little bit, because Pete got the kite for his birthday, and it was a few days after his birthday when they were playing with it in the park, and now they're talking about doing a creep show, which seems Halloweenish to me, so that'll tell you that Pete's birthday is somewhere in mid-October, it seems. At least to me. Yes, the board agreed at once. How about Saturday? Asked Casey, so we can get more people. In charge admission, put in Pete. Yes, yes. The pointer swung madly as 6 hands thumped the crate with enthusiasm. So I want to go back to the episode and check for this. And when I did, we didn't see them ask the board about Saturday or getting more people and the board pointing yes, yes. We just see them talking about it, but we can't really see their hands in the episode either, the way the angle of the camera is. So it's not definitive that this happened, but we can say that we didn't see 6 hands thump the crate with enthusiasm, because the camera most likely would have panned down and we would have heard thumping of the crate, and we didn't hear that or see the panning of the camera. And then it says, Billy hung back gloomily, rereading his letter. Later, as the little group broke up, Billy was collecting his bike from outside the clubhouse when he remembered that he'd promised his mother he would pick up some stuff from Degrassi Grocery. She'd be mad if he forgot the spaghetti for supper. He rode to the store in a hurry. After making his purchases, he rushed out and dropped the paper bag into his homemade wire carrier basket. Grabbing the bike, he pushed off down the curb. Bang! The back tire had blown. Of all the lousy, he groaned. He bumped the bike back to the street lamp, seized the grocery bag and dragged it from the basket, and a sharp end of the wire caught the paper and ripped it. As Billy hoisted the bag, spaghetti spurted and spilled all over the sidewalk. So I kind of just read into my next note because I thought that'd be easier. But in the episode itself, the bag is not pulled up and ripped. Instead, he goes to pull up the bag and accidentally knocks over his bike and spills the spaghetti all over the street that way because the bike just falls down. So that's the change. I don't exactly know why they changed this, but I thought it was an interesting thing to note. As we get towards the end of my notes in this episode novelization of this book, my next note is on the very next page, page 71. It's just that there's a half picture of Billy and Squeeze changing positions during hockey practice, where Billy skates away from his turn as goalie and Squeeze skates towards where Billy is leaving to be the goalie. And there's a little part that says Billy's stick got stuck in the net and made the net fall on top of him when the stick got stuck. In the episode that is a bit different, the stick still gets stuck in the net, but instead of making the net fall right on top of him, it actually just moves the net like a couple of inches. And I guess this is just to drum up like a little bit more drama or excitement. I'm not really sure why they changed it, but that's my guess. And then my next note is for page 74, where we get to see a little bit of Billy's thought process as he is dropping off the chain letters that he did indeed decide to type up. That night, Billy sat in his bedroom with his typewriter, some paper, and the phone directory in front of him. If he was going to send the letters, it would have to be to people he didn't know. No way he was going to send bad luck, if it was really possible, to his friends. For a moment, he was tempted. How about sending a letter to Squeeze? No, he couldn't. If anything happened, he'd feel really bad about it. If the curse was going to land somewhere, it'd better be on some strangers. He picked up the directory. Somewhere among all those names were 5 people who had the evil eye coming to them. But suppose it was some sick old guy. No, he couldn't do it. He stared up at the wall where Ken Dryden, goaltender, was poised in magnificent action on a poster. What wouldn't he give to be up there with him? There was no way, while the curse hung over him, those 5 strangers would just have to face it. They could pass the bad luck on anyway. He began to type. Billy had no chance to mail his letters until after school the next day. So it just kind of shows you a little bit of his thoughts that he was thinking about sending it to Squeeze and then thought better of it. And then he has thoughts of the evil eye coming to 5 random people. And you may know in the second episode that I did, there was a book that I still have, A Magic Eye for Ida, which is the book before Ida makes a movie about the same stuffed cat named Ida that is in that book, where the cat goes on an adventure to see if she runs away from home, what would happen, I guess. And she runs into Madame Julia and learns all about the magic eye. And the magic eye is different than the evil eye, but it's interesting to see the eyes come up again. And it makes me more curious if this book was ever read by anyone in the Degrassi cast and if it had inspired this in any way. So I'm just noting it here that this does exist kind of in the Degrassi universe, closely to it, tangentially, some people might say, I guess, that the magic eye is so right there on the tip of the Degrassi relation pipeline, just right the book right before Ida Makes a Movie came out. And it mentioned a magic eye, and now there is this evil eye in another Degrassi related book. Although this one is definitely directly Degrassi related because it's a Kids of Degrassi Street book. Some people might not care about this, but it's very important to me. I also wanted to point out that the hockey goaltender that there's a poster of in Billy's room is named Ken Dryden. I can Google that real quick. I don't know who that is, but I know nothing about hockey. Tender. Okay, well, when you search goaltender, nothing really comes up. But when you search goalie, something does come up. Ken Dryden, Canadian politician and hockey player? He's a Liberal, born on August 8th, 1947 in Hamilton, Ontario? Huh. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh. Early education in life. Dryden was born in Hamilton, Ontario in 1947. His parents were Murray Dryden and Margaret Aldea Campbell. He has a sister Judy and a brother Dave, who was also an NHL goaltender. So it doesn't say what team he plays for. He made his debut in 1971, playing against the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh. The Canadians, which is spelled with an E instead of an A for Canadians, won the game 5-1. So, yeah, I guess he's a good goalie. I don't know much about hockey, but there you go. His number is 29 in this picture. So, that's Ken Dryden. That's the goalie in this poster on Billy's wall. So there's a little bit about Billy and his inner thoughts and how he really feels like he just can't face it to have the bad luck on him, but he doesn't want to send it to anyone. He's really scared about the exact words, but suppose it was some sick old guy. So, like, he's really scared if he gives the evil eye, if 5 people who had the evil eye coming to them were already not doing well, this could really, tip them over the edge. It seems those are his fears. On page 74 and 75. And page 76 has a conversation that I didn't hear in the episode, so I kind of want to read that to you. The whole thing says, "She began to slide gingerly back along the branch and carefully climbed down. Billy threw off his jacket to help her reach the ground. 'Give me a boost, Pete,' he said. 'I'll get it.' Pete cupped his hands and gave Billy a push upwards. Billy grasped a branch and began climbing nimbly towards the kite. Lisa was watching, lost in admiration at his speed. When Casey grabbed her arm, there was a look of horror on her face. 'What's going on? Are you guys crazy or something? Letting him go up there?' Pete looked at her in amazement. 'What are you talking about? Billy's the best tree climber around.' 'The curse,' moaned Casey. 'With his luck, he'll fall for sure.' She buried her face in her hands. 'Oh, I can't look.' The others were suddenly aware of the danger, as wide-eyed they watched Billy climbing higher and higher, branch by branch, farther and farther from the ground. Lisa crossed her fingers. Pete, with his hand clenched in his jeans pocket, clutched his lucky coin. So the conversation that I don't remember in the episode is where Casey's asking, 'What's going on? Are you guys crazy or something? Let him up there?' And they're yelling about the curse. In the episode, you do see Pete grab his lucky coin, but he pulls it all the way out of his pocket and starts rubbing it. While in this book, it says he just leaves it clenched in his jeans pocket, clutching it with his hand in his pocket. So that's a small difference. And I'm guessing it's just because they wanted to show in the episode a bit more clearly what his hand was doing in his pocket, so they had him pull out the coin. Where in the book, you can kind of tell people what he's doing instead. And my last couple of notes are just page 80 has a picture. So it's a half picture where you can see Billy walking away with Pete's coin, and he's flipping it in the air and catching it as he walks. And then page 84 gives a bit more info on the haunted clubhouse that they do in the very end of the episode. So I'm going to describe that to you. It says, it was Saturday, and the grand reopening of the Degrassi Street clubhouse was on. Casey and Lisa, dressed in last Halloween's witches' gear, controlled the lineup for the creep show. Lisa sold tickets, 25 cents, folks, for the chill of your life. Casey drew the crowd, calling through a megaphone. Step right up for the haunted house. Walk in, worms. Think you're brave. Think you're tough. Come inside and show your stuff. She finished her pitch with a creepy giggle. Inside, Pete and Billy, dressed like monsters, were putting the finishing touches on a big bowl of spaghetti and tomato ketchup that would masquerade as worms. Billy had been telling Pete again how great it was to have made the team. Squeeze didn't have a chance against you, he agreed. Not when I had this, said Billy, reaching in his pocket for the coin. And on page 85, where it says reaching in his pocket for the coin, that's right under about a half a page picture of Pete and Billy sitting on these wooden crates, and then there's a wooden crate in the middle of them where they're stirring this pot of spaghetti and what has been called tomato ketchup. And that's kind of my last note on this episode novelization, because that's where it goes to the next one, which is for Benjamin Walks the Dog, which is episode 12. So Benjamin Walks the Dog starts on page 88, where you kind of get a little bit of Benjamin's thoughts as they're going shoe shopping for him. And Benjamin and I kind of have the same general idea and thoughts on shoe shopping. So I found this very interesting, where it says, Benjamin was quite happy with his old sneakers, the comfortable, dirty, feet-shaped ones. He didn't see why Ma had to fuss just because the soles made a flapping sound when he ran, and the big toe had rubbed a peephole. Peepholes were fun, but here he was at the shopping mall with his big brother Billy, trying on a new pair. He wished he was at the store's pet department instead. I really relate to him here because I also find shoe shopping and shopping in general just really boring and often very overwhelming as well if it's something that's not the normal stuff that we do. Like when we went Christmas shopping, we only went to one store, but we were there for half an hour and I was worn out it was a workout afterwards. And I really like getting these inner thoughts of just he's bored, he doesn't care about shoes. It's not something that's important to him. He wants to go to the pet department instead, which is a good setup for this episode as he walks the dog, is the title of the episode. And we see a bit of his bedroom and he has animal pictures and posters all over the place. So it says his toes felt loose inside the shoes, nowhere near a peephole rubbing spot. They're too big for me, he complained. And then my next note is for page 90, where it says Billy's mom taught piano. And I didn't really catch that in the episode. I don't know why I didn't catch on to it. But it says, the more piano pupils his mother took on, the more she relied on him to watch Benjamin and take him places. So yeah, she teaches piano. I did remember hearing a lot of piano music throughout the episode, but I figured that was just something that the editors added in just for atmosphere or suspense, maybe. But no, it's to show that his mother teaches piano, in case you didn't notice. Looks like I didn't. And then my next note is on pages 92 and 93. Benjamin is quite young and still learning how to read. Billy, you gotta come and see this sign. He began hauling his brother towards the pet department. Billy followed reluctantly. Pete dragged along behind, rolling his eyes and thinking, oh brother, kids. At the pet department, Benjamin pointed to a notice tacked to a bulletin board. What's it say? He demanded. Benjamin could read quite well if the words weren't too long, but sometimes big words seemed to get bigger as he looked at them, and they didn't make the right sounds in his head. This sign had a couple of words like that, and Benjamin wanted desperately to know what they meant. A few minutes before, he'd been watching some budgies, which I did have to Google. They're the bird that he was looking at, I guess, in the pet department, when he'd overheard the sales clerk talking on the phone. So the word puppy had jumped right out at Benjamin as he was reading the sign. Puppies were the greatest. He'd hung around a while the clerk wrote a notice and tacked it up. The trouble was he could read dog and 3 times and 50 cents, but the rest of it was a jumble. He just had to find out what it said, so he'd run for Billy. Now Billy was studying the bulletin board. That, he said, eyeing a no smoking sign. He'd wondered how Benjamin had gotten wind of Pete's scheme. No, this, Benjamin said impatiently. He could manage a no smoking sign for himself. He jabbed his finger at the new notice. Billy read aloud, wanted immediately. Responsible persons needed to walk dog for sick owner 2 times on weekdays, 3 times a day on Saturday, 50 cents a half hour. And I'm going to stop it right there because that sign was my next note. And that sign is very different from the episode sign itself, which you can see at the 2-minute and 51-second mark of the episode, where the sign in the episode actually says 3 times a day. It doesn't say anything about this special on Saturday or weekdays or anything like that. It just says 3 times a day, 50 cents a half hour. So I don't know why they changed it to be 2 times on weekdays and 3 times a day on Saturday, other than maybe to make more sense for the kids' schedules, because that's what would make sense for kids to be on weekdays. You wouldn't be able to do it in the middle of the afternoon 3 times a day on a weekday would be too much. But that would only take the forethought of knowing that kids are going to be the ones doing the job in order to make that change. So, yeah, it's just weird that they decided to change that. And I bet you they didn't think anyone would notice, but here I am noticing. Anyway, page 95 has a whole picture on that page, and I have to pull it up on my phone because it was missing on Internet Archive. Page 95 is a whole picture of them standing in front of the sign, and you can scroll in on the phone and see that the picture of this book says, wanted immediately, 2 exclamation points, underlined twice. Responsible persons needed to walk dog for sick owner 2 times a day on weekdays, 3 times a day on Saturday, 50 cents for half an hour. See Mrs. Baines, 663 Fenwick Avenue. Right next to a no smoking sign, right under another sign that says jobs on this bulletin board in the mall. So in the episode that is different, but that's the whole picture in the book. And then my next note is for page 96, where it talks about Pete walking a dog in the past. And the whole note says, he thought it over as they walked home. For one thing, there was the matter of 50 cents a half hour. They could use the money for cigarettes, and they could probably handle the job. He'd walked his uncle's Cocker Spaniel without any problems. Anything was worth a try for easy money. If they divided the shifts between them, the workload wouldn't be too heavy. Or they could do it together and divide the money. Yeah, the project had distinct possibilities. Billy was thinking along similar lines. So yeah, Pete's walked his uncle's Cocker Spaniel without any problems. I didn't know that Pete had an uncle, or that his uncle that I didn't even know about had a Cocker Spaniel. So I thought that was an interesting note to add in here. And then my next note isn't until page 99, where it has different instructions for walking the dog, again, than what is in the episode. So, Pete in the episode says 3 times a day, 2 times around the block, except in the afternoon when he goes to the park. And in the book, it says, well, you look like responsible boys. Dudley needs to go out 2 times a day, morning and afternoon, except on Saturday when he gets an extra walk at lunchtime. We take them twice around the block in the morning and give him a run in the park in the afternoon. Keep him on the leash and watch out for motorcycles. He loves to chase motorcycles. So yes, that's a bit different because it just says morning and afternoon 2 times instead of 3. And it doesn't say anything about like going to the park at lunchtime for an extra walk on Saturday, because again, it doesn't specify that there's an extra walk on Saturday in the episode. And page number 100 is where I have my next note, that it has a picture and talk of Mrs. Baines having a husband. Okay, editing me also wants to point out that her name is Mrs. Baines, and in Exit Stage Left, Lucy's last name is Baines, even though in the show it is Fernandez. So we know at some point Lucy's last name was changed, and Exit Stage Left came out before Degrassi Junior High premiered. So this just makes me curious if this is why they changed her last name from Baines to Fernandez. Now, I do kind of like Fernandez better, it just feels right for her. I mean, that's probably like a bit of bias on my part because that's what I'm used to. But anyway, I'm just curious if they ever noticed it, or if they just changed it just because it felt right. I'll probably never get to ask anyone, but it just kind of popped in my head. I needed to get that out. I'm just curious like what y'all are thinking, or if it's just me noticing this. Anyway, back to recording me. Now, I guess in the episode it doesn't have any talk of her having a husband, but you also can't see the spelling of her name in the episode. So there's no way of knowing if she has a husband or not in the episode. I just thought that was interesting. And it's page 100 where there's a little half picture where you can see her on her front porch with Dudley and the numbers 6-3 as she's handing off her leash to Pete. And she's standing there with her cast and her crutch. And it says, my neighbor took him out today, but I'll be happy to have you start tomorrow, Mrs. Baines continued. My husband will walk him in the morning, so you needn't come till the afternoon after school. But after that, on Saturday, you can take over from the morning, okay? All agreed about the money? Right, it's a deal. See you tomorrow at 4. So yeah, that's not in the episode, but it's right here in this book. And then my next note is for page 101, where it has some of Billy's inner thoughts as he kind of thinks about things, where it says, just like Pete, to try a takeover bid for the program, thought Billy as he went inside. As usual, the kitchen was full of smoke. On the corner of the table, one of Ma's scallop shell ashtrays was already full of butts. So Billy thinks that Pete is predictably going to try to take over the whole thing. And I thought that was interesting that now Pete and Ida are both seen as kind of bossy, and they seem as they want to be in charge. That's interesting. And Pete's been seen this way before. I think it was in the episode Griff Gets a Hand, when Pete is having Griff do the caricature, where Pete is seen as the owner of Griff, as Griff is seen as a dog with a trick in that book. So again, we see Pete as being bossy in 2 different books from 2 different perspectives and 2 different kids. It's very interesting to keep track of that. And page 104 is where I have my next note. where it just says that there's a picture again, and it's around the size of half a page of Benjamin pushing away his food after a little ash from his mom's cigarette falls into his plate, which is interesting to keep track of, as we see that Pete seems more excited for the smoking thing than Billy does. Billy seems more as if he is just likely to succumb to the peer pressure, and that he takes Pete's friendship to be very important, not the actual idea of smoking, which is interesting because Billy's mom is a smoker, and it seems to gross out him and his brother Benjamin, which I also think smoking is gross, and my mom is also a smoker, so I relate a lot to these boys in this way. So it has that picture in Benjamin's thoughts on Billy's attitudes towards Benjamin. It says, Billy shot Benjamin a dirty look. Benjamin returned one equally angry. Always in the way of everything, thought Billy. Always saying I'm not wanted, thought Benjamin, pushing his half-finished plate away. So Benjamin always feels like he's unwanted by his older brother. And then my next note is for page 109, where it has another picture that only takes up half of a page. That picture is of Pete walking Dudley by himself as Billy runs to catch up to him. And then page 110 has Billy's thoughts on the matter a little bit, as it says, that night, Billy was in his attic bedroom counting his money to see if there was enough for his share of the cigarettes, when he heard his brother climbing the stairs. He knew it was Benjamin because of the stomping sound. Benjamin always climbed the stairs that way. Stomp, stomp, as if he were King Kong. So yeah, again, another King Kong reference, after we already had that joke about the grilled cheese sandwiches in the last book. So just interesting to keep track of the references here. Anyway, it says, tonight something had been added. Stomp, flickety, stomp, stomp. Benjamin appeared wearing pajamas and one new sneaker, its lace dangling and tied in knots. Billy, I can't get the lace undone. Billy sighed. You pesky kid, he thought. Can't I ever get away from you? He nearly ordered him out, but Benjamin's wide, trusting eyes got to him. He took his brother's foot in his hand and began working at untying the knots. Benjamin was feeling chatty. He wanted to talk about Dudley. That was some puppy, eh, Billy? Billy grunted in reply. And it just kind of shows like how really truly annoyed Billy is at this. And it's good to add that extra annoyance and show it to y'all. My next note is for the very next page. It's page 112. It's just that this page has the owner's name for the Degrassi Grocery, and we haven't gotten to our episode novelization of Sophie Minds the Store just yet. But Sophie's parents own Degrassi Grocery, so this is Sophie's last name. And it's Miss Brendakis, is how I would pronounce that. Brendakis. So I'm pronouncing it Brendakis. But it might also be Brenda Keys or some other pronunciation that I'm unsure of. Sorry about that. But I just wanted to note it there. And then page 114 has another picture that I'm going to describe to you. It's a half-page picture of the two sandwiches that Billy's mom hands to Billy and Benjamin. They seem to be peanut butter sandwiches. Page 119 is a whole page picture of Pete and Billy walking into Degrassi Grocery as Benjamin and Dudley wait outside, and you can see Benjamin holding the leash. And then page 123 has an interesting note where it says Billy blames Benjamin for their mother quitting smoking. I thought that was very interesting because it seems that both of the boys don't want their mom to smoke, but Billy wanted her to continue smoking as an excuse for him to pick up cigarettes. Very interesting. I also have a note that says Billy blames Benjamin for their mom quitting, which seems kind of strange because it seemed like both of the boys kind of wanted her to quit secretly until Billy wanted to buy cigarettes and use their mom wanting the cigarettes instead as the excuse to get them. And then the little note is right here where it says, Billy scowled at his little brother, who was skipping down the path. If Benjamin hadn't made such a fuss the other night and given her those pamphlets. Billy scowled at his little brother, who was skipping down the path. Hey, did you see me, Billy? I walked the dog all by myself. So, what do you want, a medal? Billy said roughly. Come on. There was no point in going to the clubhouse now. They might as well go home. Maybe they could drop Benjamin off. He might have guessed. No sooner was he in the door than Miss Martin was sending him on another trip to the health center. This time with Benjamin's signed medical form. He had to take Benjamin. Pete tagged along. They left Benjamin outside the center on a stone bench. Even 5 minutes without the kid was something. The medical receptionist had just taken the form from Billy when the Gabby man from yesterday was striding in. What do you know? He announced to the entire waiting room. It's a boy and a girl. Twins. Ho-hum, thought Billy. Denise and the nephew. Let's get out of here. He began to push through the group of laughing people offering congratulations. The miracle happened. The proud father opened a box of cigars and began handing them out. One was thrust into Billy's hand. Speechless, he looked at Pete, who was holding one as well. They couldn't believe their luck. They left fast before someone discovered the mistake. So I read right into my next note again because in the episode it's a little bit different. In the episode, something kind of grosser than giving a child a cigar, which is already kind of gross, happened. So in the episode, the man is holding one of the cigars in his mouth and the other one in his hand when he is running into the building. So he takes the cigar out of his mouth. Now it is wrapped in plastic, but still, he takes it right out of his mouth where the plastic wrap was in his mouth again, with his lips touching it, and hands it to Billy, and then hands the other one to Pete from his hand. Now, while this might not seem like a big deal to some people, I must state, it was in his mouth. Okay, that is disgusting. Don't ever hand something from your mouth to anyone. Gross. Like, even before the pandemic, that is disgusting. Don't do that. Ugh. So yeah, that's vastly different. Like, it would have been interesting to see this in the book, where like, if they had kept it accurate, where the guy was walking with the cigar wrapped in plastic in his mouth, it would have been interesting to see what Billy thought of that cigar before it was handed to him. Like, if Billy had recognized what it was hanging from the guy's mouth. Or, if he would think like, how do I get one of those? Where did it come from? Where did he buy that? Is that the same as a cigarette? Because this whole time, they're planning to buy cigarettes. Cigarettes are different than cigars. Cigars are stronger, often flavored. Let me Google here. The main differences between cigarettes and cigars are size. Cigars are larger than cigarettes. Tobacco use. Cigarettes contain finely cut tobacco wrapped in paper, while cigars consist of whole tobacco leaves rolled in a tobacco leaf wrapper. Nicotine content. Cigars contain more nicotine than cigarettes. Sargagen. Cigarnargigan? I don't know how you say that. Cigar smoke contains more sargagens, whatever this word is, CARCINOGENS, than cigarettes. Long-term health effects. Regular cigar smokers are at higher risk of cancer. So yeah, there's a big difference here between cigarettes and cigars. And they were trying to buy cigarettes the whole time, and now they were handed a cigar, which is probably a lot of the reason why there's this big scene at the end where they feel like they're nauseous, and they immediately say, I feel like I might have cancer, when they're like halfway done smoking it. Anyway, just thought I would point that out, that it's in the man's mouth in the episode when he hands it over to Billy. And then the other one is already in his hand. Instead of him pulling it out of a box where it's clean, still not good, still don't hand that to a child. Don't do that. It's illegal, I'm sure. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. Page 126 has a picture. It's a half a page picture of Benjamin walking Dudley. And then page 127 has what happened in the park before the motorcycle came by. And I kind of just want to read that to you. So, they ran up steps and rolled down hills. Sometimes the leash got tangled around Benjamin's legs. He had to lean on Dudley's shoulder while he unwound it. Off again in a minute, Dudley. Having fun? So am I. We're just fine, aren't we? I'll show Billy. I can do things right. Dudley's warm breath clouded in the cool October air. So, remember that in Billy Breaks the Chain, 2 episodes before this, they were wearing Halloween costumes, dressed as witches for a creep show, and that made me think it was sometime around October. And now, 2 episodes later, his warm breath clouded in the cool October air. So, that might not have been exactly Halloween in the last episode novelization where they did the creep show, but it was still October, and it's still October now, 2 episodes later. And the episode in between those 2 is Catherine Finds Her Balance. Just to state that there's an episode in between these 2 where it's still somehow October. So, a lot happened in October. Just going to state that fact. Just wanted to show you where we are here. The timeline is important to me. Anyway, page 128 is where I have my next note, where Pete and Billy have a convo, is my note. And I just thought it was really interesting where it says, back in the clubhouse, Billy and Pete were shaking with laughter. They'd got the cigars lit and were holding them like they'd seen guys in movies do it. They crossed their legs and leaned back. They puffed. They blew out smoke. They waved the cigars at each other. They talked million-dollar deals. They bought and sold ace hockey players. They sent 20 rockets to Mars. Fun, eh? Said Pete, smoke billowing around his head. They burst into another fit of giggles. They pushed each other, and they coughed and coughed. So, I just wanted to read that because it kind of sounds like they're high or drunk or something. Like, they talked million-dollar deals, they bought and sold ace hockey players, they sent 20 rockets to Mars? Like, that's such an exaggeration of what they're probably talking about. But in the episode, you do hear the fit of giggles. You just don't get to hear this conversation. And I guess we technically still don't know if this is exactly what they talked about. But it seems so dramatic and hilarious that I just had to point it out. Anyway, on the next page, page number 129, there's another picture that only takes up half of a page. Pete is sitting on the floor, clutching his stomach with his glasses falling off his face. And you can see the cigars in the ashtray with the smoke coming up on them and, like, going up into the air. And Billy is, like, sitting on this milk. I don't know if it's a milk crate or not. It's a wooden crate thing that's, like, sitting up on its side, and Billy's sitting on it wearing, like, a topical 80s sweater. That's how I would describe that. Like an 80s sweater. I'm sure you know the one with, like, the wavy lines or whatever. It's a decent picture. And my next note is for page 130. It's, like, the smallest little semantic thing, but there is a difference between the book and the episode here, where it says, he hung the leash around his wrist while he concentrated on the lace of his sneaker. Billy says, I'm a long-time learner, but I can do it, Dudley. You watch. You make a bow. You make another bow. He frowned with the effort. He didn't notice the 2 motorcycles that were driving up the laneway, but Dudley did. So, in the episode, you actually see him put the leash down on the ground and step on it with the shoe that he's going to tie the lace of. so the shoe will hold the leash in place in his mind. That's his idea for this. This is at the 18 minutes and 58 seconds mark. So this is just like a small little trick if you do happen to have a leash where like the wrist part is a bit too big for your wrist. Because I have a small wrist and I have this problem. I tied a scrunchie halfway on the little wrist holding part of my leash and like tied it around so it's really tight. So I can tighten and loosen the scrunchie as I want, and I tighten it as tight as I can. And then I don't have to worry as much about the leash falling off. But yeah, this book is just different than the episode, and I wanted to point that out as one of my last few notes in this book by itself. And then page 136 has a little bit of Billy's thoughts and a picture. It says, Billy ran back to the park, searching more and more anxiously. If anything had happened to Benjamin, he was only a little kid, and he was mostly a good kid. Sometimes he was a pain in the neck and a drag, but please don't let something have happened to him. After a long search, he reached the playground area next to his bedroom. This was Benjamin's favorite place. And then there's like one of those little small pictures that's not a whole half a page, and you can see Benjamin's on this like upper platform. You can only see his shoes, but you can tell that it's Benjamin, and Billy's looking up at it. And it says, nobody was there. Billy turned to go, when out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of a familiar pair of striped sneakers dangling from the treehouse. The feet disappeared after Billy yelled, Benj! Billy stopped at the base of the treehouse. A forlorn and tear-stained face looked fearfully down at him. So Benjamin seems very scared that Billy is mad because Billy found out that Benjamin lost the dog, apparently. And then my last couple of notes for this are page 138 have Benjamin's thoughts a little bit on his smoking experience. And it says, can we have peanut butter and marshmallows for lunch, Billy? Which I guess is like a fluffernutter sandwich, which is a marshmallow fluff and peanut butter. Billy felt his stomach heave. You can. I don't feel much like eating. You sick, Billy? Billy remembered the foul taste of the cigars and the choking smoke. Sort of. Pete and I did something dumb today. Something I'm never going to do again. Benjamin grinned. He didn't believe it. Billy couldn't do something dumb. He was his big brother. Hey, Billy said. This afternoon, let's go get Dudley and walk him. Just you and me, okay? Benjamin leapt up and touched a low-hanging tree branch. All right. And then there's a little picture of Benjamin touching the tree branch with like a big smile and like a little gap in between his two front teeth, which is like really cute. And that's the last page of the book. So I just kind of want to point out here on this last page, page 140, it says the books in the series so far in the order that we've actually read them in, even though this was by a vote. So it says books in the series. Lisa Makes the Headlines and Other Stories, which is the one we read first, even though it was published on the same date as Griff Makes a Date. It was the first Kids of Degrassi Street book that I had read before having this podcast, so that's why I decided to read it first for the podcast. And then Griff Makes a Date, and then Griff Gets a Hand. Griff Gets a Hand, remember, has a number 3 on the spine, and it's the only Kids of Degrassi Street book that I have found that has a number on the spine. So that's how I knew to read it third. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. This is the only place where I found the books in this order that says books in the series. And then there's the classic, the back cover says, first on TV, now in books. Follow the adventures of your favorite Degrassi Street friends in Casey Draws the Line and 2 other great stories from the Kids of Degrassi Street TV series. Perfect for readers 7 to 10. You may remember from the Lormer publishing page, the interest ages said ages 8 to 11. Here it says 7 to 10. Just wanted to point out that small difference there. And then it says Casey Draws the Line, Billy Breaks the Chain, and Benjamin Walks the Dog. And it has little descriptions of all the episodes. And really that's it. So the main thing I wanted to keep track of for this, that you may have noticed, is how many more pictures are in each of these episode novelizations because our last 2 books in a row were the main character of Griff for the namesake and only 3 pictures throughout the entire book. So it's a vast difference, and I've developed some theories about this. And the thing is with these theories is either all of them can be true or just some of them or none of them at all. It's really hard to know. These are kind of like working theories. So my first theory is because this one is a female-led title for the namesake of Casey Draws the Line. And I had this theory because during our first book, Lisa Makes the Headlines, we also had a whole lot of pictures all throughout. And those are also all female-led stories in that book, but mostly in the namesake is a female-led story. And then my second theory was just that they noticed there was more interest when there was more pictures, because our last 3 books were all published on the same day, and they did 1 book with a whole bunch of pictures and then 2 books without a whole bunch of pictures. And now this one is published on a whole other year and has a whole lot of pictures again. So this theory will have more backup if there's more pictures in the next 2 books that were published on the same day. Now, I do know that Exit Stage Left, that was also published on the same day, has no pictures, but the age level for that book is vastly different because it's a Degrassi Junior High book. So that's why it would have no pictures at all. So you can kind of take that theory and not apply it at all to Exit Stage Left and kind of take it out of the conversation. Another theory is just the number of pages and just what the publisher would allow in those number of pages, like how many pages it takes to actually tell the stories and how much space you would have for these pictures, as well as the cost of each page and the cost of the pictures themselves. And then a fourth one is just the tone that you're trying to convey and if pictures are helpful or not. The subjects that they say in the description are humorous stories, so maybe the pictures are to add a lighter tone, and maybe that's why there's more pictures. So that's just something I thought about the entire time while I was reading, which is why I pointed out where the pictures are and what they're of and all of that. So I just wanted to point that out again. But yes, that is our book. That is all of my notes. That is Casey Draws the Line. And I haven't decided my next episode, of course, because, again, we have 2 more books that were published on this same exact date for the Kids of Degrassi Street episode books. And they are Martin Meets the Pirates and Karen Keeps Her Word. So soon there will be a poll in my Instagram stories where y'all can vote on the next book for me to do, where you can follow me at Lucy0520. And if you want to check me out in other ways, you can find me on Redbubble at Sierra Lucy05. I just finished my holiday drop where I am the only artist with Degrassi Christmas designs, so that's really cool. You can check those out. And then, we're also on eBay, and there's links to both of those as well as so much more in the link tree in my bio on Instagram. And I'll catch you next time at Bruce Mackey's Library. Love ya!